Hey, I'm Rob from Burger Theory. I'm here at the New Venture Institute's Entrepreneurs in Conversation, and I'm here to tell my story. A couple of things I've learned along the way. Always trust your instincts and back your product. I hope you enjoy my story.
I think obstacles some people see as problems or barriers. You seem to have dodged a lot of obstacles in getting to Burger Theory and the stuff that you've been doing to where it is today.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. But I suppose that there's always going to be obstacles. I think I already touched on it with shit happens. You expect them to come, so it's part of the game, really. And perhaps part of the way of not taking them too seriously is to think of it as a little bit of a game. But as far as the journey goes, I won't go too far back, but it's pretty simple to start with. Started with an idea with my to become business partner Dan, who's a Canadian. He's absolutely fascinated by food, and we studied at uni together at Flinders. And when we finished, I took off for a little while. I came back to Adelaide just for a holiday, basically. Caught up with Dan. Dan was doing a PhD in sociology of food, and he was also selling cookies on the street in Gooja Street. And everybody loved these damn things. And he'd always talked about food when we were at uni. So while I was at home, we got together and we started to sell to make more of those cookies and to sell those cookies and to see what would happen. And it went really well very quickly. We were making a lot of cookies, and it's actually quite a painstaking process. But we were doing a lot, and we were. It was a good reception, but about 6 weeks in, we still wasn't quite right, and we had a chat, and I decided not to go overseas again, and we decided we had to do retail. We had to find a way to do retail. And it didn't have to be cookies, it was just this theme of like American comfort foods that Dan loved, but he couldn't find in Adelaide. There was all this great produce, but no one was using it for American comfort foods at that time. Now it's everywhere, but that's where it came from. Long story short, we tried to find a shop. It was really difficult. We didn't have a lot of capital. We tried for a while. We kept missing out on leases. And then we saw this truck on eBay, and we just pulled the trigger on it. We thought, let's get it. It's in our budget. We can do it. We'd seen food trucks overseas. We thought, let's kit it out and have a crack. And that was, I guess, the beginning of the journey. And since then, it's still on the street, which is good. And we've also got a store now too.
So what made you think about not going back to a more stable job? I think you told me you had a job kind of lined up overseas, and you thought...
Yeah, I did. I had a job. And I mean, probably... entrepreneur is probably just another word for not being suitable for the job market. I should have thought that earlier. Sounds good. But I finally got one. When I said I went overseas, I spent a year looking for a job in London, and I could not get a job for the life of me, not even a bar work. So I finally snagged one at the end of that in inventing, and I went to Vancouver with that job. And it was great. I had a blast. And had one lined up in London, and coming home to Adelaide in between was just a whim. But I guess the thing with that work is that there's what makes it great, but what also makes it it's probably its blessing and its curse is that events, you're working to this deadline, it's terrific, it's exciting, but then the deadline comes and it's done. And whereas I just spent that little bit of time with Dan working with him on those cookies, you could see that actually there's really something here that may well have some longevity to it, that there could be a real need for it, and I just thought it was worth pursuing. Yeah.
People kind of talk about getting addicted to the process, getting addicted to the entrepreneurial process. Do you think you got addicted in the early days, not just to the cookies?
Oh, God, no. No, I don't... I mean, it's nice. In some senses, you got it. Almost like if you're starting a new business or something, you've seen an opening somewhere. So wherever you've seen that, you're shaking it up a bit, and that's kind of I kind of enjoy that. I mean, Adelaide, everyone probably agreed that Adelaide needed to shake up 3 years ago, and it's good. It's still going. It's terrific. Like this hub, like all sorts of things are going on. So I think that's great. But geez, the hard yards and starting a business, it's a huge learning curve. Just don't stop to think about it for too long or you'll go crazy. You've just got to keep running, essentially.
So buying the van, having never run a business before really apart from selling cookies, how did that all pan out? You had to then presumably kit it out. You had to get moving about doing what you're doing. You had not necessarily done that before.
I actually had run a business before out of uni, and it was a bust. So if anyone wants to YouTube Platypus Express, that was a previous business.
I was told to ask you about that.
I don't know why they evolved around transport. It was just a fluke, really. So I did have a bit of experience, and I think what I learned from that was I did it with a couple of great mates, and we had a hell of a good time. Then we didn't have such a hell of a good time, and we made some money, and then we blew all the money, and at the end we just had to all go to different corners of the planet because it really was a wild ride. And we're all mates now. It didn't take very long, but after that we did need some time to decompress a little. So whereas I knew my relationship with Dan was at university, he was certainly a far more measured person, I suppose you could say, than the people my mates that I'd worked with before. And we seemed to approach it in the same way. In the previous business, I was the cautious one. With the new business, it was probably the other way around, which is probably a good way to start from.
So one of the tricks of any business is to try and get as much promotion or as much following for free or at least at little expense. How did Burger Theory go about that?
We got into social media very early. It was an easy channel and it was a free channel. It was a good way to start, and we started that well before we got the truck on the road. We just got the germs of the idea out there, and then we actually had a truck. And we did some burger testing with friends and family, and we documented all of that online. And Twitter especially at that time. We found a meat supplier who was like our third follower, I think. So I mean, it was terrific then to use those avenues that would not otherwise have been available. And what happened was that people they didn't know about the hamburger, but they really liked the idea of a food truck, and they just followed. They followed what we were doing from day one, and we just had to make sure we kept that up. And we also made sure that it wasn't like an intention. It was just if someone contacted us, we just thought it was, polite to reply. And so that's how it began. And then we get good response. So we'd reply again. And whenever anybody contacted us, we replied. And we made it a conversation. If it was negative, positive, whatever, we wanted to know what their intention was, what they had to offer, why they were interested especially, and that's what social media enables.
So you're driving a truck with lots of followers. Now what happens when you open the door of the truck and there's lots of people there and you're not sure how to get food out?
Yeah, well, don't be late is the first one we found out. Because we did our first show just next to the Coffee Branch, and we were about half an hour late because the truck was at my mate's place. Dan's kitchen was what we used to prep, and we left things at both places, and it really was crazy. That whole first 6 months was just madness. We got there late, but the people didn't mind because there were 40 people there waiting for us. It was the first thing we'd ever done, which was terrific, but also freaked us out. And then we had a fire on board because we didn't connect the gas properly in that hurry to get going. So we could have blown up then, it'd be all over. But we didn't. And we made the burgers, people enjoyed the burgers, and we planned another event, and then we planned another event, and then we met other people that wanted us to come near their shop. So we just went that way.
So talkability was a big part of things in the early day, people talking about it, the online talking. and you generating buzz around that talkability?
Yeah, I think you hear those sorts of words, talkability. It was literally that we were talking back to people that were talking to us, and it grows. And we still try to do it, but it's a lot bigger network now, but we still do it as best we can.
So the team starts to grow, presumably. In commercial teamwork, not everyone's always playing for you 100% of the day. How do you cope, or how do you manage kind of your teams out there, or your team out there?
Well, I guess I used my family to begin with. My brother and sister in the grill to start with. Then my flatmate, he took the money, and then a mate of his wanted a job, so we gave him a crack, and he was good. And that is how we hired our first 10 people, was through people that knew us or was a friend, and they recommended them. And so there comes already with the sort of there's a connection there that is beyond just them wanting a job. And look, it was actually really easily and actually really enjoyable building that team. It still is. So, and we still sort of use those mafioso connections in a sense. Like that's the way it's grown. And then there's loyalty to each person that's last high. I don't know if it should be advice you take, or if that is written anywhere about doing that, but it's worked for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the role? I mean, your early days in this, there's probably a million mistakes that you made. What about the role of mentors and people that might give you advice? I guess there'd be people that always want to give you advice.
Yeah. Look, I'm happy to hear. We're happy to hear anybody who's got something for us, and then if it's rubbish, we ignore it, and if it's not, we listen. And that goes beyond just mentors. I think actually probably the main channel we do that through is feedback on social media, especially social media, Facebook or Twitter. If whatever feedback there is, we pick it up. Even if they're trying to avoid us by not, atting us, then we still find it, and we find the person. We want to know more about what their experience was, because it's one thing doing the burgers, the next is wanting to know how they received. Mentors that we've got, we've certainly had mentors. We've been really lucky. We have an excellent mentor in Andrew Lunig through Business SA, but then there's, I guess they're not official mentors, but there's lots of other people that are interested and keen to help us out.
And food, I mean, if you're in burgers, it would be wrong to ignore McDonald's. Food seems to be sometimes a fight between quality and quantity. What do you think about McDonald's?
Well, Macca's is brilliant, really. They are. It's an extraordinary machine. If you put the product aside for a sec, although it's always the same, one thing, so that's what you can say about the product. And just to execute that is pretty phenomenal. We try as hard as we can to get the least variance in our product. Ours is a bit more complicated. We do it fresh and we do it all by hand, but it's very difficult to keep that quality, and Macca's does it. I mean, everything's frozen and on machines, that's part of it, but at the same time, they do very well. And we lied. We said we didn't look at their systems and how they certainly their operations in a kitchen and the way they present their items, all that sort of stuff. I mean, we don't have a clown, but what we do is...
Could have.
Yeah. Dan hasn't put a suit on yet, so, yeah.
So you told me too that even you've had to adapt some machines to the way that you work. Like, in other words, some of the burger flipping machines or what have you, you've had to actually innovate to keep your product at the right quality or at what people are buying, essentially.
Yeah, well, actually, in a sense, what the store has allowed us to do is what we wanted to do from the get-go. We had an idea of what we wanted to do in the get-go. The truck helped us refine that. And then when we got the store, and not just the truck, we had the diner, Pell's Diner as well. And in fact, if anything had an influence on the store, it was certainly that diner. I mean, and the thing about the diner was we had Dan's passion for burgers and all things American comfort American-style foods. We had Orally, which you've seen with her waffles, and we put those two elements together, and we ran it in a table service setting. So we really got a feel for that model, but we still had the same equipment that we used on the truck. So the store, we were able to put in the actual equipment that we had coveted, and the systems we'd learn at Pearls with a bit more know-how from the truck, I suppose. Yeah.
Is that how the partnership with you and Dan kind of works? Dan's the food zealot, if you like, and you're the sort of business process zealot. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, we always just said that Dan flipped the burgers and I drove the truck. It's probably a bit more than that. It's certainly, I guess, how the roles began, and it still is how the roles are now, except that we're both certainly moving into each other's terrain, which is a good thing. I've learned a hell of a lot about food since I came on. I ate it before I met Dan, and now I know about it. But those are converging a little, which is really good. So Dan takes a lot of the business. He handles a lot of the business stuff, and I handle some of the food stuff now. And he has the confidence in me to make calls about the food, and likewise with the business.
And it's a partnership built on hard work, I imagine. It's still a lot of hard work?
Oh, yeah, it's heaps of work.
Do you think people understand how much hard work's involved?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, it is a lot of work, but at the same time, the longer we go, we can choose where we direct that hard work. Mm-hmm. And we can, the delegation's always a key one, and thrown around a lot, and a lot of people have told us to delegate a lot longer ago than when we are, but we're certainly doing it now where we think it's appropriate. And so you can direct that hard work, but it's still hard work. And if you're not, we could have sat on the truck, I suppose, and ran it as a nice owner-operated business. It's very predictable, except for traffic and rain and weather and what have you. But it would have ended there, and then it'd be a lot less work if we were just running that truck, and it'd probably be doing okay. But it was never about the truck for us. It was always about bringing these hamburgers to town, and the truck couldn't do it as we wanted. Mm-hmm. So there should be some sense in there somewhere.
So is it about making money, or is it about delivering a product? Or is it both?
Well, it's got to be both. The good thing about one of the only good things about hospitality, I think, because it is a very scrutinised industry. Everyone has an investment in what they eat and drink, which is a blessing and a curse, because people talk about it, which is great, but if they're saying bad things, it's not great. When you're running a truck, you get the cash up front for your product. So that's one of the good things, that you can manage your cash flow from that process very well. Yeah. Whereas lots of others, you've got to wait for that money and you're hanging on.
Innovation is often thought of as this great breakthrough moment of things that, are so innovative that just by their very nature, they're something quite different or newsworthy. In bringing burgers to town on a different vehicle, in a truck, as well as bringing a new concept to town, again, innovation in terms of that great breakthrough might not necessarily be there, but it's incredibly innovative. Innovation isn't always about the big things, is it?
Well, we certainly didn't invent the food truck, but we'd seen it in action, and we just put it in Adelaide. And it's crazy that they weren't in Adelaide when you consider the wide streets and the 300 days of sun. They should be here. We saw them in New York in the middle of winter, people lining up in the freezing cold for food trucks. It's like, well, these belong in the warm place. Mm-hmm. I don't think we innovated, we just imported a concept. And it just happened that we did it first. If we didn't, somebody else would have done that same thing. Yeah. And it's really good to see it as it's taken off in Adelaide. No one actually realises, but Adelaide is the food truck capital of the country. And while everybody's arguing about whether we should or shouldn't have them, it's actually a massive boon for the state. I mean, Portland's built its reputation on food trucks, and Adelaide could very much... It already has swept into that space, just got to wait for the, tourism bodies or whoever to find that out and start selling it. So I guess that was the central innovation that we introduced, but we certainly didn't invent it.
Yeah. So in terms of, are there days though still, and probably there would have been days back then, that you would have want to throw your arms in the air and just say, enough now?
That was about 4 o'clock. I think. No, look, I think the more you grow, the more problems you find. But the better you are equipped at dealing with them. So that's really how that goes, I think. And you can throw your arms in the air, but it's not all bad.
Yeah.
The perspective is always good. It's certainly not life or death.
And how important was timing in your journey? There was lots of timing events. You were kind of first to market in the food truck area, and then it seemed like some timing events sort of played a little bit okay after some early obstacles.
Yeah, we were definitely very lucky. We had to be there, but we were lucky. When we first flagged the idea of a food truck to Adelaide City Council, I think they closed the door on us laughing. It was before the current sort of regime. But then Yarwood and the new there's a bit of a sea change at council. We were already trading from a private site, so we went through the old system where you have to get a development application and lodge that. And so we got a site in town that we could trade from. So we sort of pushed, even though they said no, we did it anyway in another way to show that we couldn't go anywhere. All our money was in the damn thing. So that's how that happened. But then I think some movers and shakers saw the popularity just of the idea. It was very popular very quickly, and we were lucky for that too. But they saw that, and all of a sudden there was talk of regulation for food trucks and licences, and it happened, which was extraordinary. It happened within 6 months of us starting. And I think if we'd started in any time in the previous 20 years, that would not have happened. So that was certainly good fortune. But we did keep knocking on their door.
And how did you deal with the criticism at the time, perhaps, of traders kind of saying you're taking business away from them, or other critics saying these unhealthy, or whatever the criticisms might have been at the time?
Oh. Well, there wasn't actually a lot of criticism early. In fact, existing traders invited us to bring the truck. That's how we began. And then we got a development application on private land. They couldn't do anything anyway. But then certainly when there were more and the licences came in, there was definitely more noise. I think a lot of it coming from media and particular councillors that wanted to shine a light on the issue. But yeah, you just do what you do, and if it's legal, who cares?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I'm going to finish by asking you a few questions. You've had the benefit of hearing these.
Yeah, I should have thought of some answers.
You didn't solve every problem then. What word do you really hate?
Actually, no, I did think of some when you said that. Well, at the moment, I don't like landlord. Unfair advantage, I think, is another. Yeah, they're annoying.
How would you describe what you do or your job to a 5-year-old?
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy one. I make hamburgers, and I think 5-year-olds love that.
It's got to be the coolest job in the world.
Yeah.
You're SpongeBob.
Yeah.
At your
I missed that.
I said you're SpongeBob.
Rewind. Oh, right. Yeah, good.
At your funeral, what would you most like to hear or overhear someone say?
Oh, this one I did think, I can't believe he ate the whole thing.
What profession would you least like to do?
Hamburger maker? No, I don't know. No. I don't know. I think I've done a few. Ice cream scooper was hell. I did that once. So that'd be it. It was awful. And I had a microphone. I had to spruik the ice creams, and they were it's really hard to scoop ice cream if it's too cold. So that was a hell of...
It doesn't look cool.
I lasted 4 hours. That'd be it.
What sound do you love the most?
I didn't really think of that one. Sound do I love the most? I'd say something crappy like the cash register, but I don't know. Yeah.
was going
It always breaks, so I don't like that sound either.
All right, thanks, Rob. Thank Rob very much for his time. It's beautiful.
You didn't invent the hamburger, so what makes your product, apart from the delivery model, better?
Well, I'm glad you think it's better to start with, so that's a good... Well, it's actually something we're really looking at now, especially with the store, because with the truck, I think people showed up with... The people that were coming to the truck generally had an idea of what they were coming for, and it was much easier. The marketing was sort of done. The store, we get a lot of walk-ins, and there's a lot of people that I think don't know what they're walking into. And so we've got to focus now on getting a bit more of that out. I mean, it's very simple. It's the most time-consuming part of our business, but it's the piece that we think makes all the difference, is that we actually grind all the beef that we sell in every burger every day. And it's a nightmare. But it's the only way you can really control how fresh that product. And we think the most important thing about the hamburger is how fresh it is from being prepared to going to the customer. So that is our whole raison d'etre. That is a key part of our operation. We think that's what it is. We hope that's what it is, but because we spend so much time doing it. But yeah.
Often hear friends of mine talk about the differences between the food cart and the restaurant. How do you deal with the consistency between the both?
Oh, it's a great conversation, and we certainly get people saying they prefer the truck. We get people saying they prefer pearls. Then we get people saying they love it at the shop, which is that's all healthy, like because they're eating it. So that's a good. We enjoy that debate. I mean, what we put in the store is this grill that is heavier, is almost as heavy as the truck, which we could never have on the truck, and cost more than the truck. It was our biggest investment for the shop, but it allows us to control that cooking process a lot more. There might be, we don't know, we talk about it ourselves, like what's the difference here and here or there, and it's probably, there's marginal things, but I think if the store loses anything, it probably makes up for being much closer to the mark more often.
Can you tell us about frozen custard? So,
happy to, yeah. Love to.
And just tell us the story behind the Possible campaign and how that originated and all that.
Yeah, sure. Has anybody heard of frozen custard in here? A few people? Cool. I guess I had this stuff in the States when I did a little tour with Dan when we were trying burgers and pizzas and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, it sort of changes ice cream for you. Like the burgers I had over there changed burgers for me. Well, this stuff changed ice cream in much the same way. And it's barely in Australia. There's a couple of stores in Canberra. And so we looked into it. We want to introduce it at the store because it also takes a massive machine that you can't put on a truck. But it also comes with a massive price tag, the machine. So from a capitalist perspective, it would have been an insane investment for us. We would have taken years to get a return on it, to do it. So we thought we'd put the feelers out and see if there might be sort of community interest in this product. It's really hard to sell something that nobody's ever tried. So we put together a campaign and hoped that people would trust us on the basis of what we'd done with hamburgers, I suppose. And we did that on Possible, a crowdfunding site, if you guys know that one. But basically, we almost, in a sense, we sort of pre-sold product. That was the rewards that we offered, was essentially pre-sold products or T-shirts or something, people pledge an amount of money towards that machine. And we raised the money in that way. I think we ended up $27,000 or $28,000, which took us over more than halfway to the cost. We're putting in the rest, but we can afford it now, whereas we couldn't afford it if we'd gone alone. And the other benefit of it is that now people are at least talking about it, like it's at least heard of now. So we hope that when it arrives, instead of just going, this is frozen custard, we now have a bunch of people with a vested interest in what that product is. So that's it, I guess.
How do you rate the collective food truck activities like Fork in the Road, has that impacted on your market? Do you feel that the market's split when all the trucks get together, or would it? How's that worked for you?
A Fork on the Road's a horrible event. No, I'm kidding, Joe. The organisers back there. Fork on the Road is brilliant. It's so good because it brings. The amazing thing is it brings so many people. Like every time Joe puts one of these things on, there's thousands of people come to check it out. So there's a success right there. And there's, but then there's visibility for all the other trucks too, including us. Like people still go there and find the Burger Theory truck for the first time, so it's tremendous. And that is, Fork on the Road really is something that I hope can really gain a more permanent foothold in some kind of, I know part of its appeal is mobility, but I think it goes beyond that. It's like brilliant collective action right there. It's terrific.
I think food's a really interesting thing. I think it's something that connects us to our family and it connects us to our past. And I think part of the food truck success is that people see your food as being authentic. Do you think that having a North American accent behind the counter, has that helped you in developing your own idea of what an authentic food truck should be like? And do you have a sense whether or not your customers feel it's more authentic? I mean, this would be an equally valid question about the waffles. Do you think that your customers feel that cultural connection because of that accent behind the counter?
I don't know about that. Sorry. Look, I think the key with the authenticity, it has to be authentic to the food you're doing. So we're doing American-style burgers. I don't know if it's important that there's an American accent behind. There is an American accent behind the food. But I think what it is authentic to that food. And I think that's the important thing. So the grinding the beef, they talk about burger to bun ratio, which I'd never heard of, but that is so important. Americans have so many different styles of burgers, and this is that Australia just doesn't. There's burger places popping up everywhere now, but we're still nowhere near the saturation of the Americans. They've been working on it for a long time. So I think you've just got to. I think probably the key is being authentic to that type of food. I don't think you have to be from there, but you have to honour what's behind that food. And I think, and from there you can do other things. Like at the moment, Dan's built a special that's it's Cleveland Rocks burger. He's got peanut butter bacon in the burger because they've invented just about nothing else but putting peanut butter on bacon. But he's twisted it with Indonesian flavour profile. So I don't know. Like I think you can have fun, but as long as your base fundamentals are, honour that food.